Right, through customs and immigration, that was quick.
South African side.
South African side. Always easy getting out of the country. Getting in is the problem. 5 days left to our trip to Zim. We've spent most of the day preparing stuff to make sure that when it's time to pack up, we're ready to pack the car and go. However, things are looking a bit bleak at this stage. A couple of days ago, the Zimbabwean government announced that there would be a 10-day quarantine for all travelers arriving at the Zimbabwean ports of entry. This, of course, makes it very difficult. The thought of getting to port of entry, then having to spend 10 days in quarantine, apparently at your own cost, or our own cost, as it were. And so that's kind of put a bit of a dent in our plans. We're not 100% sure yet if that's going to change. The information that's coming through is a bit conflicting. And at this stage, we're still really hoping to go through to Zim. I've been wanting to do this for many years, and we've been trying to do this trip for about 2 years, but it hasn't worked, largely because of COVID and all the rest of it. So at this stage, it's not looking great. Basically, the requirements are that you must arrive at the border post and then do a PCR test. So the fact that you would have done that a day or two prior is irrelevant. You'll still have to do it when you enter the country at the border post. In addition to that, regardless of the PCR test outcome, you will still have to go into 10 days quarantine. And while you're in quarantine, you will have to do a PCR test at about 5 days into the quarantine as well. Of course, if you then test positive, you would go into isolation. So yeah, this is the 4th wave of COVID in this part of the world, and the numbers are looking a bit scary as well. But at this point, the information we have is that the impacts of the virus are relatively mild, but it's still early days. Now, in addition to all of this, we have a problem with the wild dog as well. The center diff lock actuator has been acting up, so eventually we've got that replaced, and unfortunately the replacement is not working, and Toyota will not replace that on warranty. And so that's also kind of a very frustrating thing at this time, but we're trying to sort that out, and we really will need all 3 diff locks. We are going into the Zambezi Valley, or intending to go to the Zambezi Valley in the height of summer. It's going to be wet in some places. It's going to rain relatively frequently, I expect. And so we really need to have the car at its full capability. So yeah, at this point, we're almost entirely prepared with the exception of the car. And we're gonna kind of, see how it plays out. Really want to do this trip. Been wanting to do it for a hell of a long time, and just sort of fingers crossed, hoping things work out. Okay. Yeah. It's been a crazy, stressful week. We had the car out, problem with our center diff lock, which hasn't been solved. So we still don't have a center diff lock. There's been information coming back from Zim and people that have crossed the border, which is kind of conflicting with what the authorities are saying about quarantines and isolation and PCR tests. So we're really not 100% sure on what's going on at Beitbridge border. We have pretty much at the very last minute managed to get the car back, managed to pack the car, and we're now on our way. Sort of taking a chance. We don't know how it's going to go, but we've been planning this trip for way too long, and at this point we are driving to Beitbridge. We're going to sleep over at a campsite called Rakanaka, which is just outside Makado. Fantastic campsite, one of the first that we reviewed, so looking forward to being there again, but it's just a quick night stop over. But basically we are driving through to Beitbridge, and we're going to take it as it comes. After a nice restful sleep at Jakanaka, we're back on the road, heading to Messina and to the Beitbridge border post. It was nice to be back at Jakanaka. That was one of the first campsites we reviewed. I think it was the second one. And really nice to be back there. And I think it's been so long that I've forgotten what a cool spot it is. Also, we arrived there pretty late, or we were driving there, it was pretty late, and the owner got a hold of us, and she, of her own volition, offered us a caravan that's on the site because we're just going to stay over for the night at no extra cost. And that's really fantastic, man. We really appreciate that. So it just made things a lot easier to just arrive, get into the caravan, sleep for a couple of hours, get up, have a nice shower, make some tea, make some coffee, and get back on the road. So thanks to Gail at Jakanaka, really appreciate your hospitality. And the place is fantastic as always, and I hope a few more people go to see it. We're definitely going to be back there later this year because we are heading back to Zim again, this time to Gonarejo, and we're probably going to stop over there as well. So crossing borders these days is quite a story. Obviously with COVID and the requirement for PCR tests, etc. It's been quite a stressful week in that respect, just hoping that neither of us is COVID positive. Did the tests came out negative, which is obviously fantastic for more reasons than just being able to get across the border. We're in the fourth wave. Omicron is the variant that everyone is talking about. Obviously very infectious, which is concerning as well. The government of Zimbabwe has instituted significant control measures. Every traveler, every visitor is required to go into a 10-day quarantine having crossed the border. And that's put a bit of strain on our trip. We were actually quite unsure about whether we're going to go through with it because 10 days is quite a lot, and nobody wants to stay at some government dedicated quarantine facility because you don't know what you're going to have to deal with when you get there. But fortunately, we're staying at a place called Mabwe Bay, which is near Binga on Lake Kariba, and they have been gracious enough to arrange a letter from the Ministry of Health. So it's a designated quarantine spot, so we can actually go in quarantine for 10 days at our first destination on Lake Kariba. So I can think of worse places to quarantine. Now in the build-up to today, in the last week and a half, we've heard a lot of conflicting information as to whether the measures are actually being enforced, but we are going. We've been planning this trip for 2 years. It's been cancelled or postponed because of COVID a couple of times, and it's been something that I've wanted to do for many, many years. So we are going, and we're going to deal as we go. Driving from South Africa into Zimbabwe, there aren't many border options. In fact, there is only one direct border crossing from South Africa into Zimbabwe and vice versa, and that's the Beitbridge border post. Otherwise, you've got to drive through Botswana, for example, and there's also the option of driving via Punda Maria through Mozambique. All of those add quite a bit of time onto the journey because you've got to do then more than one border crossing. And border crossings can be quick, but they can also be several hours long, depending on how much traffic, how much people there are, and how motivated the border officials are. If you're heading through Beitbridge, something to take note of is that temperatures will soar possibly into the lower 40s. So try and get there early if you can. We are not going to get there very early today. We're probably going to get there, I'd say, around 9:30, maybe a bit more than that. So it's going to be quite a hot border crossing. It's better than crossing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But something to note, if you're going to cross the Beitbridge border post, it's very low altitude in the Limpopo Valley, and obviously it's in the tropics as well, so it can get really hot. We're now heading into Beitbridge border post. There's been significant changes here over the last year. Basically, they're trying to upgrade the border post. There was a short period just before we've driven through here where there were massive backlogs, trucks backlogged for several days, apparently queues of 3 or 4 lanes right across the highway. Apparently a lot of that has cleared up, or we're hoping it's completely cleared up. Apparently the border is now a bit more efficient. So I guess we're gonna you know, the proof of the pudding is in the queuing. Haven't been through Beitbridge border post for probably 7 years or so. And this place gets massively crowded, especially in the December period. It's taken me once 8 hours to get through the border post. So yeah, I hope it's not going to be 8 hours today, but we are relatively early, so hopefully we beat the crowds. Relatively early in December and relatively late in the day, but usually the longest queues are actually at about 7 o'clock in the morning because a lot of people sort of arrive at that time. So we're arriving a bit after that, so maybe we'll catch that sort of mid-morning lull, but we'll see when we get there. The border posts were closed and now they're open, sort of. And the Drive Zim group advised my significant other that we must get a letter to get to the border post. So she emailed several times and phoned and WhatsApped several times and eventually got a letter which is more of a request. It kind of says, please let these people through the border post. It's not an instruction. So yeah, I guess it's in the hands of the border officials. Now we're probably not allowed to film going through the border posts, so we're going to be careful. We're going to film as what we can practically, but we don't want to piss anyone off. So you won't see a lot of filming of the border post, I expect. Quick tip: you can now apply online for an ETIP, so a temporary import permit, which you require to take your car over into Zimbabwe, and you can do it online. So that's great. Much better than doing it at the border post. You still have to pay the taxes, etc. at the border post, but it's kind of nice that one of those processes is now online. The app is called Zimra's eTip, that's ZIMRA, Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. So Zimra eTip, use the app, don't use the website. The website's completely useless. Yeah, good tip if you are driving through Zim.
Goeiemorgen, hoe gaan het met jou?
Ja, goed. Can I see your license, please?
No problem. No problem. I was expecting you to speak Chivenda, then I was going to say.
Isn't it?
Chivenda Angaz.
You don't know Chivenda?
No, no Chivenda.
Which language do you speak?
This is Zulu, Kangana.
Kangana.
Yeah.
Is everything in order?
Everything is in order.
Sure.
Sure.
How far are you rushing?
Big Falls. Not rushing,
Oh.
slowly.
Slowly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rosie.
Okay, thank you so much.
Very well, bye-bye.
Right, through customs and immigration, that was quick.
South African side.
South African side. Always easy getting out of the country. Getting in. Problem. Entering the Zimbabwe side is chaotic. There are no signposts and there are no official people guiding the process or guiding you on where to go. The touts start coming up to you while you're on the bridge, and then when you cross the bridge, there's pretty much a flood of touts. There are a couple of security guards here and there in uniform, but they seem confused and it looks as if they're ineffective and pretty much the touts are running the show. We can't film inside the border post, however the chaos is pretty much carrying on inside the border post too. Fortunately though, there are only a few people crossing. There's not that many travelers that are getting stamped in here. Okay, so we're eventually done with all the procedures and it's time to leave. First, we've got to drop off our customs documents and get through the customs stop. And then we've got to drop off our gate pass, and then it's pretty much driving out the gate. Just outside the gate, we meet our first police roadblock, and here they check our TIP and our passports as well against the TIP, and then they let us through. So we finally gotten through the border post. We are through Beitbridge border. We are in the town of Beitbridge. Getting through the South African side, getting out of South Africa was all of 15 minutes, absolutely no queues. I think there was one person in front of us at immigration or something like that. That process is pretty straightforward. It's signposted, etc. Driving into Zimbabwe is chaos. There's no signage. As soon as you stop, there's 10, 15 touts around the car trying to tell you go this way, do that, etc., etc. You know, and obviously they're doing all of this for a fee or an expected fee. So we went through that process. We got our COVID certificates looked at by representatives, I think, of the Ministry of Health. Their uniforms actually said World Vision and United Nations something. I can't remember the details now. Obviously we can't, you know, we didn't film all of this. From there we went into the Zimbabwean border post proper, which is still under construction. So there's a parking for trucks and there's a parking for cars. There are no signposts, so you don't really know where you're going. You're just kind of listening to people telling you go that way, and you know, and park there. Sort of random, like I said, touts that obviously want a fee or you know, want to make a living or do make a living from this sort of thing. Then the fun started. There is the new border post which is being built, which has all the nice signs and symbols and so on. And we went up there because, you know, there's a lot of people telling us, no, go this way, go to the old building, don't go to the new building. But you know, at that stage, you're kind of like, you're getting irritated with the swarm of people around you trying to give you directions and tell you what to do and so on. So we just followed the signs, went to the officials. Turns out that that's only for commercial purposes, so for trucks and all that. And the guys were very helpful, very professional. The building's actually really nice, air-conditioned, brand new building. And they said, no, you've got to go to the old terminal, which is what we went to. The old terminal, of course, is old. It's old. It's largely kind of manual processes and so on. And when you get there, it's not clear what you should do first, where you should go first. So we first walked into immigration, which kind of makes sense. We had a bunch of guys around us all the time, kind of following and trying to give instructions and bustling amongst each other, trying to get the business. So we go to immigration, and at immigration, it's at the old terminal, like I said, and that's pretty old, and you know, it looks like 70 sort of manual processes going on there. Anyway, we go into that building, we do the stamping of passports and so on. We then had to pay a road access fee, which was 300 Rand, and we could not pay it by card because they would only accept MasterCard, and I've got a Visa card. So we paid that in cash, and from there we asked what's the next thing, and they said go to customs. And we get to customs, and then they said no, you must go to the trailer next door. And we go to the trailer next door, and there's a little 40-foot container next door. And we got there, then we said, okay, what's next? And they said, no, you must go to the other 40-foot container next door. And we went to the 40-foot container next door, which had no real signage on it. It wasn't clear what that was for. And then those guys said, no, what are you doing here? Like, we have nothing to help you guys with. You must go to this first container. So we go back to the first container. And there, they looked at our COVID stuff. They looked at our letter from the embassy, which they also looked at immigration. I forgot to mention that. In fact, we left a copy of that at immigration. So if you're going to do this, just make sure you've got plenty of copies of everything, because you don't know who's going to ask to keep a copy of it. Did the thing in the trailer, they looked at stuff, kind of stamped our gate pass, and then we went back to customs. We get back to customs, they send us out of the building to a cage where there's a set of customs officials, and we go to those guys, and then they stamp the gate pass as well. Not sure what the story was there. And we go back to customs again. We pay 800 Rand. That is our third-party insurance and also an electronic travel import permit. So we got the TIP travel import permit online, or at least we got a reference number, and we thought that was going to be all that's required. But you get there, you've got to pay a fee along with your third-party insurance, which apparently is mandatory, even though we have a letter from South African insurance that says the car is covered in SADC countries and so on, and is third-party and all the rest of it. But apparently it's mandatory, and we paid it, and we got a receipt, and we also got our actual temporary import permit. So I don't know if there's any point to actually doing the TIP online. I don't know if it saved us any time. I don't know if we would have had to go and get a reference number somewhere else after that. But anyway, we had it. We went through the process. Having done that, we then went back to the car, which is a fair walk, and it's about 36 degrees today according to online temperature indications. So that's a fair walk back to the car. We get back to the car. There's absolutely no signage. There's absolutely no instructions on what to do next. Obviously, you've got these touts that are telling you go this way, do that, etc. So we drive to where the cars are supposed to be inspected on the way in. We get an official to come over to the car. He looks at the car, asks, what have you got? We had declared that we've got a whole lot of camping gear and personal clothing, that sort of stuff. And the guy said, okay, that's fine. Do you have anything that's got serial numbers? We said, yeah, we've got a camera with a serial number on it, or cameras with serial numbers. And eventually said, no, it's okay. And he stamped our gate pass to go out. All of this time, we've got these touts around us as well. And eventually that's done. We've got all our stamps. We can now drive out. But at this point now, you know, these guys now want to negotiate a fee as well. And I had pretty much told them earlier, look, you know, I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm going to speak to the officials and all that sort of stuff. But truthfully, if it hadn't been for them, we would have messed about for hours trying to find out what the procedure is, which office to go to first, where to go, and all that sort of stuff. So they actually did bring significant value to the process. They probably saved us quite a bit of time. The entire episode did take us about 2 hours, to be fair, which is a fair amount of time. A lot of that time was lost at customs because, you know, the queue wasn't being managed properly, and it was just a long process. It took long to get your papers stamped and to pay your money and all that sort of stuff. So the touts did perform a service of value. I would have preferred if we had just, you know, gone through a formal process like you do at the South African border and queue up here, queue up there, there's do this, do that, and get it done. But it wasn't the case. Okay, but we accept that this is what it is. So we then had to negotiate a fee, etc. And I told the guy, you know, 50 Rand. That's what I said. And then he came back and he wanted 300 Rand and he wanted $20, etc. So, you know, this is kind of the discussion we went through. And like I said, there was actually a bunch of them around us all the time. But eventually we had the one guy that was pretty much, you know, on top of things and taking us through the process and so on. So we went through that process, jumped back into the car, started the car, drove to where we're supposed to get out now. Then we had a person approach the car in uniform, ask for the gate pass, which we presented to her. And then she kind of looked for confirmation from who we assumed to be a senior person, some guy in civilian clothes that was on his phone. So we kind of sat there for a while this guy thought about whether we should go through the boom or not. Eventually he gives the nod and then we drive through. And then we get stopped by the police and the army just outside, and they want our details. So we went through that process as well. Okay, so we've just arrived. It's extremely hot, absolutely still. I don't know what the temperature is, but it's probably a humid, I don't know, 28, maybe 30 degrees Celsius. Got the roof tent up, and that should be enough for us to get a night's sleep. It's dark as we've arrived here. It's about 11:30 at night when we arrived, and so we're gonna, you know, scope it out in the morning. We can't really see much at this time. Fortunately, they've left the lights on for us so that we could figure out where the campsite is exactly. So we've managed to find that. It was relatively easy. There's a gazebo, and that was kind of the landmark that we were supposed to look for, with the lights on as well. So yeah, it's been a long day, long drive, and we are finally here.